Okay, welcome to the playing field, everybody, and welcome back to another special episode with one of our top domestic coaches here in New Zealand. I'd like to thank everybody so far for their positive comments, their likes, and their feedback around the episodes that we've had so far. And there's certainly a lot more to come with some of the guests that we've got lined up in the coming weeks. One of the first guests, which I was really keen to get involved on the playing field, is Mr. Shane Verma, and Shane joins us from Auckland today. So, Shane, first of all, how are you doing, and how are you keeping busy at the moment during the pandemic?
Yeah, funnily enough, it's been a lot busier than I thought I'd be. Just got a number of clubs to sort of check in with around the North Shore and up to Warkworth, and everyone's sort of in a similar situation across the country in terms of club football. Everyone's waiting to go, and federation level, we're exactly the same. As soon as it's safe, and the sooner we can get out there to get kids and on the field, it's going to be beneficial for everybody. And then spending a lot of time in the community space right now, just developing some content and delivering some workshops nationally. So we've done 2 so far, and there's been huge uptake in that. And it's actually starting to develop my passion more in the community space, funnily enough, now.
Excellent, and we'll certainly delve in more to your current situation and your current role as we go through the conversation. But I think you're in the same boat as everybody else, as you said, and really using this time to reach out and be involved in football across the region. One of the reasons that I got Shane involved today is that I first came across Shane would have been 8 or 9 years ago now. Both involved in the FTC and the NTC program with New Zealand football in various forms. And again, over the years, Shane has always struck me as someone that's deeply studious, has put a lot of work into his coaching and also his coach education. And I think is certainly someone that's reaped a lot of around putting in a lot of hours and thought into his coaching career. So I think, if we go back, Shane, to as with many of our other guests, you came out of university. You were in Christchurch at the time. What was your kind of first main involvement in football in the Christchurch region?
Yeah, I guess the first opportunities I had was with the Federation Talent Centre. It was quite beneficial. I just finished the C license course, and it was one of the first ones that Rob Sherman ran in the country, and it really opened my eyes to the possibilities of what a professional coach could really be. And that those 2 slides in there of the dentists really resonated with me, and I still remember that because I was like, I definitely want to be that surgeon dentist, not the one with the pliers. So and then I was really fortunate that I was talking with Karush Monsef, and there was a group at Mainland's FTC which I was able to shadow him with for a couple of weeks, and then managed to be able to take over that group of 14-year-old boys. And that sort of got me more into that professional coach model, I suppose.
So you obviously started off with your young youth boys. At what point did you start to go into women's football? I mean, was that a deliberate choice? Was it by chance? How did it come about that you go from coaching FTC under 14 boys to then the next step?
Yeah, I suppose it might have been the year after in Christchurch and around the South Island, there used to be representative tournaments, and one of the girls' teams was looking for a coach. And since I was involved with the FTC program, they asked me if I'd like to be involved and take that team. So I thought, well, it's a good opportunity, something that I hadn't really done before. So it was a bit of a step into the unknown for me, a bit of outside my comfort zone. And to be honest, it was a really enjoyable experience. And it was one of those ones that sort of reconnects you back to the game moments. So I think that's what really ignited the love of coaching in the women's game for me.
And then you took a next step then into coaching with the Mainland Pride team. How did that eventuate? How did that come about?
Yeah, as a very I guess a fortunate one where Mike DeBono had just been appointed as the coach of the Mainland Pride, as it was called then. And while I was coaching my FTC group, I noticed him sort of leaving a meeting, and it had been something regular. And then in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm coaching in this girls program now. It would be great to sort of get some advice from him and maybe just get some tips and pointers. So yeah, one day I just caught up with him in the car park as he was about to leave and just asked him if I could just come down to a couple of sessions and just observe and maybe pick his brain on, because I was entering this new chapter, I suppose, and a bit of an unknown. So if he could, provide any hints or anything. So yeah, he just sort of said, yeah, come along, mate. Those that know Mike, he's very open and, never closes the door on someone. So I was very fortunate that he allowed me to come in. And I remember the first training session, he said, oh, yeah, it's tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. at English Park. And I was like, oh, okay, yep, no worries, I'll turn up. Turned up at 6 a.m. and the people that were meant to open the ground didn't actually turn up that day. So he sent the girls for a run, and then we had a bit of a longer chat. And yeah, he just said to come down the next few sessions. So it came down, and as it progressed, he just sort of asked me a few questions around bits and pieces. I had some understanding of Raymond Behind's conditioning model, and he was quite interested in implementing that with the Pride. So yeah, he gave me the leads of actually implementing the conditioning model with the Pride that season. So going to being an observer to having a small piece of knowledge that I could bring to the group, yeah, he utilized me in that and got me into the environment. It was yeah, great timing, I suppose, but also having a little piece of knowledge that I could provide was also key, I suppose, to getting into that environment.
So the Pride have obviously been very successful over the years, consistently. What was it about that group of players over that period of time that you think set them apart from anyone else in the league? Like, what was their success?
It's an interesting question. Obviously, you had Gareth there with the Pride before Mike came on board. So I guess the group we inherited from Gareth and the work he'd already done with the group in terms of laying like cultural values and setting a high standard of training and beyond what was in women's football at that time domestically, sort of set the scene and also sort of laid the path for us and for Mike and myself, I guess, and the coaching staff that came into that environment. It was about taking that and building upon it. So the foundations had been laid, and now for us it was to put the walls up. And at that time, the Pride were training 3 times a week, but there was no strength and conditioning resources. There was no additional support. There was just, a manager, head coach, and a couple of assistant coaches. Now that when I think ahead to what the Pride have, they've got sports scientists involved. They have GPS. They're probably the best, I guess, supported teams in the National League in terms of peripheral support. So that sort of started with Mike linking in with the polytechs around Christchurch. And I guess in Christchurch, one thing I've noticed is that there's this really hard-working mentality down there, and it's evident in the Pride and the Pride players. Being their opposition for 2 seasons now, you see it in games where you think you're on top of them, but all of a sudden something kicks in with that group of players, and it's like a family for them, and they'll fight for each other and they work really hard for each other. And something that it's quite hard to coach, and it's one of those little bits of unknowns that when you come against it, sometimes you don't have an answer for, and they're very good in terms of the culture that they have as a unit and an organization.
And during your time at the Pride, as with many coaches in NZ, I'm assuming that wasn't a full-time role at that stage. So what else did you need to do in order to sustain a living, or make sure that you could commit as much as you could to football at that time?
Yeah, my first 2 seasons, but the prior I was still a student, and FTC was a way of like sort of boosting up the funds. Had to have a part-time job. The Pride was a volunteer role at that time. There wasn't much funding available, so it was more out of passion for me to do it, and for me it was a learning opportunity to be around good players. I learned so much from the players, but also from Mike himself. He was a very good mentor. My first season there was Karesh Monsef was there, so I was able to learn a fair bit from him as well. So he sometimes stuck around and observed a few minutes of trainings and would provide feedback afterwards, when I'd see him. So for me, it was more about a learning opportunity. And then towards the end of the second season, one of the board members at YMAC sort of approached me and said, would you be interested in a role? The director of football at the club had just recently moved on. So it sort of opened up an avenue there to explore. And that sort of led into a part-time stroke full-time employment in the football space for me.
And with that director of football role, Shane, there was obviously a coaching element to that. Were you attached to a particular team, or did you were you head coach, or were you more of a supportive type of director of football?
No, it was attached to coaching the women's team there. So the director of football role there, the first year was very heavily involved with community programs in terms of doing football in schools, delivering in the skill centres. So it was very heavily delivery based as the director of football. So if I wasn't in a school during the day, I'd be doing the administrative work on the outside. And then in the evenings, from like a lot of directors of football, from 3:30 onwards, you're on the grass, either delivering or aiding and guiding coaches.
So admittedly, my first real knowledge of YMAC would have been through the under-17 competition up in Western Springs, and I think that was a real success for you. Can you give the listeners a bit of detail around how that tournament went, and what were some of the big things that you felt you were really proud of having taken that team to that competition?
Yeah, I think the first thing to really highlight with that group of players is that the vast majority of the girls in that YMAC team had been juniors at YMAC, so they started off in the First Kicks program there and they'd come through. So YMAC actually has a really good history of developing female players. So I was very fortunate to inherit a very good group of young players, and when I first joined the club, that group of players they had just spent their first season in the Women's Premier League in Christchurch, and they'd lost 20-something-0 in some of the games, 2 games, and they were a very young group, but they had potential. So the first year of senior experience plus with me sort of laid the foundations for that under-17s tournament, and then as a group we decided that this is something that was achievable by the group of players to go there, and we set the target of actually making the semi-finals. And we were still down 2 players, so we managed to get into guest players in Amelia Abbott and Maya Hahn, who went on to the under-17s tournament. And we had a couple of players join us from other clubs for the season, in terms of Jada Stewart, who also went to the under-17s World Cup. So we had and Macy Fraser and Gabby Rennie, who were at the club from junior. So we actually had a really strong core of players that were going to go on eventually, and they didn't know it at the time, but be bronze medalists at a World Cup. But like I said, the goal for us was to make it into the top 4. The previous years, the club had made the top 8, but never sort of cracked into that top 4. So for us, it was like, yeah, let's make the top 4, and then we'll see what we can do the next year. So it's just sort of a bit of a pathway, knowing that no team outside of from the South Island had gone on and done as well as we were going to do. So it was an interesting tournament. Macy got injured in the second game, who was a key player for us. And one thing that resonated with me still is that how well the group got around each other, supported her through that time, because anyone that knows her, she just wants to be out there playing. And the group, it actually, I think, was something that really brought the group together now when we're in that moment, because they're like, well, we can't rely on, a couple of players to get us through games. It's got to be a group effort now. And I think that resonated throughout the whole group. And then come that last game against Forest Hill, that I guess that Christchurch mentality really showed in that last game, where, to be honest, anybody watching that game would definitely say that Wymack, I mean, if you look at the statistics, I think we only had 2 or 3 shots on goal. There's ones that hit the crossbar from Forest Hill. Forest Hill scored from had a goal disallowed for offsides. Leah Curry made 3 or 4 fantastic saves in that game as well. So it was one of those ones where, if you're someone that was betting on that match, you would have put all your money on Forest Hill, because the flow of the game, we really had to dig our heels in. And it was one of those ones where when you come off as a coach, you're relieved that the result's gone your way, but more importantly, you feel so proud of the players, because the amount of effort they all put in to get that result just showed the character of the group, I suppose. So yeah, I think it was one of the more defining, and I suppose will be one of the longest term memories for me when I'm older and out of the game, definitely.
That's quite impressive. They've gone from, as you say, losing to the extent that they were in that first season, to then making so much progress. I mean, looking back on that time, what do you think were some of the biggest things that you had to instill with those players to get them to the point where they could progress as far as they did? Was it more social emotional? Was it anything did tactically? What were some of the insights into how you shifted them from those results to that performance?
Yeah, so I guess the key one there is the results and performance words. When I came in, the first thing was that we didn't really talk about winning and losing too much in that environment. I did a lot of reading and research. I was quite fortunate to talk to Scott Robertson with the Crusaders and sort of see how they went about things. And funnily enough, he mentioned that they focus on performances and not the result too much. So that resonated really well for me, and I went and researched it more. I found that talking about winning and losing, it becomes outcome focused rather than process focused. So we started really drilling in, how we perform as an individual, how do we perform as a team. The players always, reflected win, lose, but there were moments where there was a game where we lost 4-0, but the players are actually really, I guess, happy. Not the word to use, but quite proud of their performance, because it was one of those games where they actually played really well. And so that was part of it, was that side of things. The other part was that we really went back down to basics in the first year in terms of the tactics of the game. So introducing the key principles slowly. And I guess in the first 6 weeks of pre-season, I did try some more advanced work with the group, and then realized where the level was. So I was kind of trying to keep it at that level and progressing a little bit further through that. And then I guess the next case was we did a lot of work in our second year as a group on character building for individuals. We did a lot in the social emotional corner of that group. And the group of players that we had, they're fairly young. The oldest player, I think, at that time was about 21. The youngest was 15. So even though it was a broad age band, it was still quite a young group of players in terms of senior football. So they were able to interact really well with one another. And evidence of that was sometimes they'd actually have to go into the changing rooms. We're meant to start at 6 o'clock, but the players are still in the changing rooms at 6:10, just having a natter and just talking and playing music and enjoying the company of each other. So as a coach, sometimes you just need to respect that and realize that sort of camaraderie and, I guess, sisterhood in the girls' game, or brothership in the men's game, is something that can actually come out in part of the performances of the team as well.
So given all that progress that you made, Shane, there's obviously a point where you then decided that obviously you needed to move away from Christchurch to Auckland. I mean, how did that come about? Was there, was it a particular aspiration of yours to coach in the National League? Was there something about that move and opportunity to Auckland that was strong enough to make you come away from what sounds like quite an intriguing appointment and project?
Yeah, it was a really I guess at that time I was very happy where I was in Christchurch with that group of players. And there are certain circumstances that sort of arose around that time that I guess led me towards having to move to Auckland, I suppose. In terms of the club I was with, there was they're going under kind financial situation, so employment hours weren't there anymore. So that's mixed with an opportunity with Northern to join with the Lights presented itself. So again, I moved up here with the intent of, I suppose, doing work remotely for YMAC for a few hours a week, plus just sort of doing some, I guess it was more volunteer work with Northern. So, and then sort of just sitting around the office, just helping out where I could, doing my own work, doing some work for the Lights. And then, it was more to be, I guess, closer to the national teams, but also see what a new different federation does as well in terms of that National League space. See how the clubs up in Auckland operated compared down to Christchurch. And it was another learning opportunity. And then for Gemma coming in as the Lights coach was like the final tick for me to join up with her. Having worked with her with the national U15s camp, really enjoyed the way she worked, knowing through the B license, doing the B license together. She was a really good candidate and someone I got along with quite well. So it was a no-brainer for me to come up and just have another experience and just give something else a go.
So I mean, certainly that transition into a new region, would be quite daunting for some. And you've obviously then been able to get some good people around you. You mentioned Korosh Monsev earlier on, obviously Gemma Lewis as well. I mean, what were some of the successes for you from a personal level in the assistant coach role in that first year with the Lights?
Yeah, I guess with the Lights, the first year being Gemma's assistant, again, there's a lot of learning opportunities there. But for those that know Korosh, he really challenges you as a coach. So discussions had in the office, for example, around football, technically, tactically, around any of the four corners, he'll really challenge you on things and really makes you think about what you're going to say, how you're going to go about things, because you really need to know the why, the how, the what around things, which was really, really good because it's good to be challenged by other people. But also in saying that, he doesn't sort of just drop you in and walk away. He'll actually guide you through to an answer that you came up with yourself. He won't tell you what's right or what's wrong, which is really good. With Gemma, there's a different style of coaching compared to what Mike did, but it was still relevant in the female game. So that was also good to learn from as well. And it was a different environment because with Northern and I guess NZF, since we're just down the corridor from one another, it's quite interesting. It almost felt like you could be in a full-time environment because you just pop down at lunchtime and just have a discussion around the National League, or if you've got a small break in your calendar, you can quickly have a chat around the last game or the next game, which sort of, I guess it freed it up. Previously with Pride, it was over phone calls, emails, where this time it was more face-to-face, which was a lot more enjoyable, I suppose. If you're discussing something, you can get out the tactics board really quickly and whip something together in 10 minutes rather than try to describe something over a phone. And then in that season as well, I took on a lot more on the analysis side of the game. So in terms of opposition and our team analysis, which was a really good learning tool for me. So really jumping into that pool, I suppose, was really exciting as well, something new to learn. And we're able to do some halftime coding for halftime as well. So there's a new technique to learn. So the first year of being an assistant with Gemma really provided new tools, gave great learning opportunities as well for me.
And obviously, there's a point where you move into the head coach role. It sounds as if you've had some extensive experience, as you say, like in the analysis and the conditioning, all these, the support roles, if you like. From a traditional, head coach role, did you integrate any of those into your daily operations when you took over the head coach, or were you able to assign those to other people?
Yeah, so when we came together, so the group of coaches I had with my year with the Lights last year was we had Andrew Dunn as an assistant and Harriet Steele as an assistant, plus we had Caitlin Savage, our goalkeeping coach, and we had some sports science support, plus we had a physio as well. And it was really good that we were able just to give, in terms of sports science, you've got Harriet Steele, who's been to World Cups, Olympics, who's been there, done that with the Ferns. So having her, I pretty much let her and our S&C just take care of that side of things in terms of conditioning. So they were the voice in that, and they were the experts around that. In terms of the analysis between Harry, myself, and Andrew, we would discuss the games, would watch opposition, would be messaging or phone calling each other frequently around it. And then in terms of collating videos and clips and stuff, I just put that together for the group and put it out for the players to watch. So it was more sharing the responsibility. And then come training, one thing that I learned really well from Mike was allowed the assistant coaches to coach. So allowed giving Andrew and Harry opportunities to coach within the sessions. They brought in great new ideas. They designed some stuff. They brought in things that I wouldn't have thought of as a coach, because it's really good to have assistant coaches with different ideas as you, and they're able to bring in some really interesting games and training opportunities within trainings as well. And then also with our physio, she actually had a really good connection with players, so she was able to feed back on how players are doing in terms of welfare and bits and pieces. And unfortunately, we had a very injury-plagued season, so I guess Carly and myself were on the phone a lot more than we'd like to be, but it sort of became a running joke where I just tried to avoid phone calls just to not hear the bad news sometimes. So no, but I think one thing I've learned from the coaches I've worked with is that if you surround yourself with good people with good knowledge, you put yourself as a head coach in a really good foothold to have a good season.
And you always struck me as a very reflective guy, Shane, who's always striving to make things better.
Mm-hmm.
Should the opportunity come around again, obviously to lead maybe that team or even another team, what would be some of the things that you would change or evolve from your coaching practices previously? Is there anything that has already kind of stood out in that respect?
Yeah, I suppose one thing that I guess in my last year of YMAC in terms of cultural development around the team would be something that I'd want to bring back into the Lights. For those that sort of know the National League and the women's game, it's they finish club season in August. If they're in the Kate Shepherd Cup final, they're playing in September, and then the next week you're straight into the National Women's League. So you don't actually get much build-up time with the players because they've come straight off the back of a club season and they're straight into a National League season. So it does become quite difficult to do those bits and pieces. So for me, it would definitely be coming together a little bit earlier, but not training, but also starting to develop the culture of the group, giving the players bigger voices would be another one now. I think I'm now at a point as a coach where I guess previously, and this is probably a negative from myself as a coach, was that while I'd listen to players, sometimes I wouldn't hear what players were saying, if that makes sense. So now it's giving them a bigger voice in the environment. And then, still continuing things like not focusing too much on results and more on the performance side of things, and start trying to develop a culture that sits within the Lights for not just one season but carries on. So do what Gareth did with the Pride, what Mike carried on and what Gunny's carrying on with the Pride, and maybe set something up that lives longer than my tenure with the Lights, I suppose.
Excellent, excellent. And I guess to finish off, Shane, like I said, with the National Women's League not being a full-time competition, what current stage are you at now in terms of, obviously you're still at Northern Football, you're heavily involved in club development, coach development. What are some of the things you're doing to kind of fill the gaps between the seasons?
Yeah, it's quite interesting working in the federation space now for my second year. It's quite interesting when you jump into the National League because you haven't spent a whole winter coaching, so you're fairly rusty at the start. To be fair, it's kind of like, oh, what's all this? It's kind of going back to basics sometimes. So one thing that I do need to do this year is definitely do a little bit more coaching, I guess, in the winter, whether it be just linking with a couple of clubs here and there, jumping in for a session, whether it be juniors, youth, or seniors. It doesn't really matter to me, but just to keep my feet on the grass would be one of them. But the other one is the role this year has provided me an opportunity to link in with 12 clubs around the North Shore and seeing how they operate, meeting new people. They've all got fantastic ideas as well. So there's a lot of good people doing good things in football in Auckland, and the lockdown's quite interesting, where it's now clubs are now starting to talk to each other a little bit more than they would have previously, which is really interesting to see and kind of exciting as well to see where it leads as well. So I think I can see a more collaborative approach where clubs work together for the benefit of the game rather than the benefit of themselves now, which will be quite interesting. And I guess when you're at a club level, when I was a director of football, you only think about your club and your membership. When you're at a federation level, you think about all the clubs and the benefits of the membership and the clubs to the game. So depending what tier you sit at, it's kind of like, well, how can I have an overview mindset, I suppose, in the club space? And it's quite good that we've got people in clubs in Auckland and I guess around the country as well that have that mindset now. So it's how can we link those people together to benefit the game nationally?
Well, I've certainly got no doubt, Shane, that you'll remain busy, you'll keep giving, and you'll keep trying to make sure that obviously clubs and players across the whole game are in a better place beyond this. And with that in mind, I'd certainly appreciate your time to talk through some of your journey here today. And again, for those that are listening, there'll be some common trends that are coming out of the guests in terms of the work they're putting in and the willingness to sacrifice, go into new environments, smooth areas if they need to. And again, Shane, I think you've provided a really interesting story. So I just want to, again, thank you for your time on the playing field.
All right. Thanks, Stephen.
And for those listening, we'll certainly be back again soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe and make sure that you keep sending in all your feedback for us to make sure that this is as beneficial as possible. So, yeah, we'll see you on the side of the playing field again soon.